right, this is View from the Rafters, but today, this is the Mega Boston Celtics Crossover Podcast episode. We've got View from the Rafters represented right here. We've got John Karalis with Locked On Celtics. We've got Chris Forsberg with Celtics Talk. And last, and certainly least, is Jay King with Still Poddable. And by the way, I just want you all to know that this is the authentic version of each podcast. As you see, Grande is all dressed up in his suit and tie, and at the end, Jay is wearing sweatpants, which is what he does every single time he does anything.
I told you I was going to dress up. You told me to act. I told you to
just be you. Just be you. That's all we want.
That's his dressy backwards hat.
That's his gimmick.
It is. Shout out to Skidmore College.
Well, and he's representing his podcast, just in case.
Wait. I need to know, how did Jay get the nod over B-Rob and Sam?
That's a good question. I think that he holds a little
He's trying to start interpod beef.
I think you hold a little goodwill with someone important in our PR group.
I mean, I know Packard has a history of dodging me, but
Packard also doesn't live in Boston anymore.
Yeah, I mean, but he was in Boston for the holidays.
Yeah. That's tough. Tough hit.
Maybe I made a mistake. I don't know. I'll tell you by the end of this. What's that?
You got a sweatshirt on, too.
Yeah, but this is a nice sweatshirt with a jacket on top, okay? So this is classy. All right.
It's also, I'm on Forsberg's podcast.
Not enough.
So now we're beefing.
So, you guys are enemies today.
There's a little Family Guy Simpsons thing going on.
100%. 100%. The crossover episode. So what do we do on the crossover episode? Maybe we just get a bunch of different types of takes here. So first and foremost, obviously we are all around the team in many different ways and different times and different varieties. I'm just curious what you guys tell people when they ask you, like, what is it like being around the Celtics all the time? Jay, what do you say? Because I know you get these questions from your boys, from your family,
all the time.
your in-laws.
I think the best question is, you can jump in, but like, people always say, do you talk to the players? And I'm like,
yeah.
That's my job. Do you talk to the people you work with?
Do you watch the network? Like, what's happening?
The thing I always say is, no, I can't get you tickets.
Yeah.
That's what I always have to say.
Well,
I have people reach out that I haven't spoken to in like 10 years, asking if they can get me tickets. I'm like, I can't even get my wife.
Yeah.
That's even worse than it is for me.
Yeah.
And I can probably
And
get
no,
some
I
tickets.
don't work
Wait, no, I can't.
for the Celtics.
Yeah.
Right.
Everybody thinks I work for the Celtics. I do not work for the Celtics. They just think because I'm there, I work for the team. No, I cover the team.
There's a clear line there.
There's a line there.
Technically, you do, right?
You're way over.
Yeah, I'm way over here. That's why I'm at the
You
end.
are actually employed by the Celtics.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I walk both sides of the line. Abby's got a little bit of that too. Chris does a little bit. It's almost that's how we should have lined up.
Yeah, we should have lined up and shot the ball. In order to,
By way of access, I would have been in the other room.
yeah, that's true. But hey, you're here today, so we appreciate
the point
it.
is that we all serve all of you. That is the point.
Yeah.
No matter what it is we do, and that has to come first, no matter what.
I
So
would also say that the players are taller than you can even imagine.
Yeah.
And
what do you do when you do?
when you do get to stand next to them.
I'm used to being around just super tall people now. I went to a restaurant the other day with my brothers who are all like 6'2", 6'3", and the waitress was like, "My God, you guys are huge." We're tiny.
This is nothing.
What are you talking about?
And I will say, even
I'm the smallest person in the room, in every room.
we were walking into a hotel recently, and Jaden Springer asked Kristaps Porzingis, like, "How tall are you?" Jaden
How do you not know that? You're his teammate.
The year I did
like 7'2".
The year I did the Red Sox, everybody would ask me, "Hey, what's the difference? What's the biggest difference between doing the Red Sox and the Celtics?" And my answer I always came back to was, well, I felt taller.
Yeah.
That was
That's-
When you went to the
that's
Red
fact.
Sox, yeah.
Baseball players are generally shorter
I
than
was
you
like-
would think,
I was-
and basketball players are like taller than you would
Dustin
think. Dustin
Pedroia was on that team or whatever.
Yeah.
You felt like you were 8 feet tall. Yeah.
Love it. But each of the podcasts kind of brings a little bit something different to the table. So do we consider them our competition?
There's no competition for us.
Oh, really? Oh, really? Yeah.
What way do you
Please
mean
explain, Jay.
We're the best daily Celtics podcast by far.
I think John might have something to say about that.
It's the best daily Celtics podcast that nobody can find.
I was saying behind the paywall. Yeah, exactly.
Are we talking paywalls here?
We're worth the subscription.
I guess you people will have to not find out. No, so we start out, we're talking about being around the team all the time. One of the most unique parts of that is being around Joe Mazzulla all the time. Things have changed, since the first day that we all found out that he was going to be the head coach of the Celtics. We all didn't really know what to expect, I would assume, from all you guys as well.
Certainly didn't know that it was going to be like this, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. With a championship within a couple of seasons
Fair.
and some unique answers in the media room. What have you all learned about him, especially you, because you get a lot of one-on-one time with him. What have you guys learned about him over the last 2 years since he took over, since that first day when he was named head coach?
I want to start down there because I'm more interested because my daily life is you guys getting your shot at him for however long that lasts. And then there's
sometimes like 90 seconds.
There's a period of time between when we start on the air and the period of time when Joe and I are just talking. And that period of time every night is basically talking about everything that you guys just did. And asked for the last,
Well, you probably have a better view of that than we do, though. But it's crazy because when he took over, he was the assistant coach who strapped a ping pong paddle to Romeo Langford's hand. You know, and we didn't know him much more than that. Obviously, we talked to him from time to time. We had a little bit of time with him, but then all of a sudden, he's the face of the Boston Celtics.
Yeah.
And I think for that first year was very challenging for him, just kind of learning everything that came with that. I think he was obviously an insanely talented basketball mind.
Clearly.
We've seen that.
Somewhat
obviously
psychotic
a great
from a
leader.
basketball perspective.
Like everyone jumped on board. Even that first year, which was so rocky, nobody jumped off board. But that first year was really hard for a number of reasons.
My God.
And
Challenging for him, but challenging for all of us as well, trying to adjust to that and find ways to get the best out of Joe when he wasn't always that excited to be there.
We just didn't know his personality, right? Like we didn't know how you had to approach it, how you had to have another question ready, because if you don't, that interview's done. He's going to unclip the mic and go. And so, but what I love is the only interaction I'd had with him before he took over the head coach, we were in Charlotte, Kemba's first game back there or something, I think, and he was Kemba's kind of guy. And Kemba told me something like, he did this drill where he had to make a certain number of shots in a certain amount of time. And he gave me the number, and I was happened to be in the elevator, and I went, hey, Kemba told me he made, in 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and he just looked at me and went, he told you that? And then he just walked off the elevator. Didn't follow up, didn't give me anything that I could actually use. And I was like, that was abrupt. And then I was like, years later, I was like, oh, okay, now it all makes sense. The other thing I always take away is the only scouting report we had was that when Derek got here in that mid-season trade, that he got sent to Joe and learn the defense because Joe was going to teach you everything. So I always had this impression that he's a defensive mastermind and this is his thing. And all we do is talk about offense and three-pointers. So you always pigeonhole someone, but again, you're just getting to know him was the big thing and knowing what makes him tick.
I think the thing that stands out to me about Joe is that he is very much his own person. He is not one to play to the convention of, he doesn't play the game, right? He's not a politician out here.
You don't think so?
He's not. he's not going to
really, really bad one.
Yeah,
that's
one of the two.
He doesn't humor anybody, right? He doesn't take a question. Like a lot of times you just put a question out there. Sometimes you ask a question because no one's asked anything yet, and it's starting to be like, anybody?
Someone's got to ask a question, right?
And you just throw something out there to get the ball rolling, and he doesn't play along, and it's a challenge. I think
he wants you to come prepared to work.
Well, yeah.
Even though it has nothing to do with him, really.
Not wants, he demands that you come prepared.
You'll be rewarded if you come prepared.
Yeah.
But it's not even just being prepared. Everybody should be prepared coming to work. It's that he has his own way of seeing things. And he's done really well trying to meet us, not quite in the middle, but get a little bit closer to where we are about okay, I get what you're trying to do. He has his view, he has his way of doing things, and reporters, podcasters, we don't know what it's like to be NBA players. Even though we've played some level of basketball, the NBA is so different. He doesn't know.
You've played the highest level out of all of us, just to be clear.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah,
Thank you for asking.
Just give him his flowers.
He didn't really ask.
Formerly professional basketball player, John Karalis.
But no one knows what it's like to be in the NBA, and he, I think, is so protective of his team that when you ask a question that runs counter to how things are, he'll give you a negative reaction. When sometimes I've had to tell him, no, we actually just want to know. If I get something wrong, if I phrase a question wrong, feel free to rephrase it and tell me this is what I think the heart of it, and then I will counter with that. So I appreciate the fact that he's meeting us somewhere.
And I think that's a part of the growth too, right?
Yeah.
Of understanding each other. It's not just us understanding him, it's him understanding us too.
And I think him being himself, that's part of what helped them take a leap last season. Because that first year, he stepped in for Ime under insane circumstances. and the players had just gone to the finals. They believed in everything that Ime did. So if he had come in and changed everything to put his own stamp on it, guys would have been like, what are you doing? We don't want to do this.
It worked.
And then they had the tough end of that first season where they fall behind 3-0 to Miami, can't quite finish off the comeback. And he came back the next year, and finally he was able to do things right. And he changed everything. He changed practice schedule. He changed how they work. He changed every single thing, how the assistant coaches worked. And I think him doing it his way really helped propel them forward.
Because another way to phrase that, what the two of you just said was, by doing it his way is a discomfort to a lot of you, but it is an extraordinary comfort to the guys he has coached.
Side, yeah.
And that's just it.
But I also would say that it's
But
not.
he wants to make them uncomfortable too.
Yeah, but not in the same way he is going to make you uncomfortable. We were in Chicago. You were 2 weeks ago, a couple of weeks ago, we were in Chicago, and somebody came half prepared. They wanted to get a question for a story they were writing about the TV ratings in the league that everybody's writing, and threw out this generic question, and Joe literally shrugged his shoulders and gave no answer. And then all of a sudden, you guys have been in the spot where you're in the room, and now you feel like you've got to ask it again or ask some follow-up that you're not prepared to ask for, and he begrudgingly gave him an answer. But Joe is a jiu-jitsu player. He is a jiu-jitsu player in his mind, and he certainly is on the air while he's coaching and when he's in there with you, and even when he's in there with me. I love the competition element of it. I spend an inordinate amount of my day preparing for that segment because it's worthwhile. As you said, it's worthwhile when you do prepare, you're going to get something good out of it. And that's how he lives his life. It's how a lot of competitive people, how we live our lives. And it results in something like everything with Joe. It results in something different than what you have been used to before.
I agree with you in that when I know that I am doing that pregame interview with him, the one-on-one, I think about it all day long.
That's
as I'm getting ready, as I'm eating my lunch, I'm just thinking about how can I phrase these questions to get the best out of Joe. But also, I will say that it feels different when we're in the room. It doesn't always feel as adversarial. I think especially now that we have spent so much time with Joe, that when he does give us those non-answers, it's like, okay, we're not going to talk about that today. It's not a big deal.
Okay, you deserve that because you didn't have a great question.
Right.
Yeah.
But it comes off differently on camera, and then still Poddable will throw it up and like, what did Joe say? What is that segment called that you guys do?
Oh, Stuff Joe Says.
Stuff Joe Says.
Not exactly Stuff Joe Says.
You guys will rewind stuff, and I'm like, oh, I didn't feel that in the room, but that is really funny the way he said it or what he said.
I do think the outside perception of his relationship with us is different than the reality.
Yeah.
I don't think that, first of all, there's nothing ever personal.
Oh, yeah.
You know, with that. If he ever comes back and is adversarial in any way, it's because of the question or his mood or what he wants to convey, not like, I don't like you personally. Because afterwards, when we're done, like, we'll have, like, well,
So
maybe
you think
Jay
he
is a
likes
little
you?
bit. And look,
He didn't say that.
I'm a Rhode Islander, just like Joe. We get each other. It's like a love-hate, and we love to hate. But yeah, I think he wants to be challenged too. Like he wants the challenge, and he is equal opportunity. Like he will treat people how he wants to be treated. So he wants to be challenged by things, and therefore I will challenge you. I saw a podcast where he made some dude get into a cold tub to ask the questions, to see if he was committed to getting the questions.
That was us, thanks.
Oh, was it you?
No, that wasn't us, but it was one
It was
of my
NBC
crew.
Sports Boston.
Adam Hart had to get in the tub, and pretty much Adam is essentially the producer of the segment. But Joe had a great relationship with him, and pretty much said, like, all right, if you want us to actually do this interview and give you what you're looking for, you need to get in the tub with me. And so Adam got down, and the Outback Center got in. Shout out, got a great little interview.
He is a firm believer
Adam.
in making himself uncomfortable, thus making everybody else uncomfortable. That's where results come from, and it translates to every single part of his life.
That's true. One thing you were going to say there that I think trailed off a little bit, but what people don't know is that when the cameras turn off from that pregame media session, and like maybe there was a moment that people might perceive as kind of like, going at it a little bit, he'll walk down off the stage and he'll actually talk to us all about that moment. And someone might be able to say, oh, here's why I did that, or he might say it back.
Yeah, he will clarify like what he meant to say. Sometimes when it comes off as like confrontational, he'll come out and be like, no, I didn't mean it. That way.
So he's been an incredible story that we've all been around and watched kind of develop over the last couple of years. All of us have been around the team for a long time at this point. What's everyone's most interesting or favorite story that they've covered either on the podcast or just within, your writing responsibilities of covering the team?
My favorite was back when Marcus Smart was here. I don't know if we want to go that far back.
Yeah,
but
go back as far as you want, John.
So my absolute favorite story that I did is like the silliest little thing is, if we remember, there were like consecutive games where the ball got stuck at the shot clock, and Marcus Marcus got the
Before Grant was around to get them off.
Right. Once he was on the floor and he knocked it out, and once he was on the bench and he went over and he knocked it off, and people were cheering like MVP, MVP. So I caught him on the side and I said, how funny was that? Just to get a little fun quote. And it turned into this big there was a time where they wouldn't have even, they would have booed me or something. And it was like, now to hear the MVP chants, it shows how much I've come along in this city.
And that came about from taking
I was like, oh my God, this is like gold from Marcus. So the silliest little basketball being stuck on the backboard turned into Marcus kind of a story about how far he's come in the eyes of fans in the city of Boston. So that was really cool for me.
Is that what you guys have all found? Is it's those little things that you pull out that people are probably like, wait, that's a story? And then you go a little deeper and something's there?
I mean, for me, it was IT season because IT was such an open book. We would show up. He broke into a train station to see his Nike ad campaign one day. And he just started.
Pick me last again.
Yeah, he was, again, remember, he had gone from being, bench guy, sixth man, but then all of a sudden he's in the MVP conversation.
He was a sixth man here, by the way, before.
But he always still approached it like he was the last guy on the bench, and he was willing to tell you he was again an open book. And I will romanticize that season forever, not only because of what happened that year and how improbable it was. Probably second only to last season in the championship was the most enjoyable season to ever be around because I just went in with such low expectations, and he made it so much fun. And we always say, right, we don't cheer for the players. Well, maybe D'Amico.
Absolutely, I do.
We cheer for stories, right?
You guys see me in the media section when we make a big shot. Yeah.
No, Scal,
I am biased.
Scal does that, but we do cheer for storylines, and you cheer for good people too, right? And IT was chief among them, and so I hate how the way that ended. It wasn't particularly fair to him, but I understood it. But that season was awesome, and I'll never forget that year.
That was unbelievable. That playoff run that he had with his hip hurting, with his sister just passed away. He had 33 points. I believe it was the day after his sister passed away in the first game of the playoffs.
Right?
He knocked the tooth out, spent 8 hours at the dentist.
Didn't he lose a tooth? But I was
surgery.
no, that's too much to what you've already said. No, he did. He lost.
And then had 50-something on what would have been his sister's birthday.
Right.
In the playoffs.
That was just an incredible run. And proof that you don't need to win a title to leave a legacy that people will remember 100%. For a long time. My favorite story was about Marcus Smart too. It was about his AAU days. And it was just because it reminded me of my AAU days. His team was crazy. They stayed together from the time they were 10 to 17. They had parents cussing the kids out, but loving it. They had parents getting in fights. They had the kids. Obviously, Marcus was probably a little fiery back then like he is now. And just working out it reminded me of my AAU time, so I love that.
What about you, D'Amico? What's been your favorite?
My stupidest story that I just really enjoyed telling, it actually had to do with Gordon Hayward. So he came into this was back at in the Waltham days. He was at the practice facility and he just randomly was drinking a bottle of water, and someone was like, "Is that cold?" And he was like, "No, it's not. I don't drink cold water." And I was like, "Why?" In my head, I'm like, "Why does he not drink cold water?" And so I came back to our offices and I pitched my boss. I'm like, "Hey, Gordon just said he doesn't drink cold water, and I have no idea why. And I really want to find out and write a story about it." He's like, "That seems like something no one would care about." And I'm like, "I think people will like it." So we wound up running with the story, and I talked to him, and basically the moral of the story is that he perceives cold water as when you drink it, your body has to warm it up, and you waste energy by having to warm up the water. So
Joe Mazzulla would make him do it.
He would love that, yeah. He'd want to challenge him.
The cold
but yeah, I
Only
think
ice for you.
I think to your point, John, earlier, of just those little nuggets that come out that you're like, okay, that's something I want to go a little deeper on, and then you never know what's going to come out of that.
I noticed that no one has mentioned this current team of players as their favorite stories because this is the most buttoned up, professional, don't tell you a thing type of team. You have to go back to Marcus and IT. And,
well, that's what I was going to say. My favorite moment of all time was an Al Horford interview in Cleveland during the playoffs, and it was the first time he'd ever beaten a LeBron James team. They did it in Cleveland, and it was the only time I've ever seen Al, like, out of his
Go find YouTube. He's so amped. Like he's ready to jump through the camera.
It was in a back hallway.
I was like, was that him?
He was still on the floor. Yeah, and it was the most
out-of-body experience.
Yes, and it was just, that is who Al is on the floor. That's not who we get to see. That's not who we talk to. But he was still in that moment, and it is the most Al-like moment that I have experienced with him, and it was just so genuine and pure, and it was awesome.
I'll just throw out there that I think that's more Al
than we really think.
There's no
sure.
question. That is Al. He just has the ability to
turn it up.
What he is with us, and to what I was saying just now, like, all of these guys, like, when we leave the locker room, I'm sure are just incredible personalities.
Yeah.
They have this incredible ability to just, like,
even Jason, right? Like, I don't think any of us. I don't think any of us personally know, like, the real Jason that he is in his day-to-day life because he's just doing media with us.
Every once in a while, we're standing there waiting for a scrum, and you hear him talking to a couple of his friends, and you're like, oh, he actually has personality. Look at this. Like, he's joking and busting chops and all that stuff. You're like, oh, man, why can't you do that with us? And he comes up to us, and it's like, just trying to get better. Come on.
He lets it out in his commercials, though, at least.
This is the velvet rope nature of and the evolution of the league. In Max's days, they were flying commercial. You'd be with them in the airports. The media would fly with them.
Yeah.
So obviously, Abby and I, we get to see things that people aren't going to see, that even general media isn't going to see in quote-unquote real lives. But the best stories, and the reason we're not talking about it, because that team won the championship and they were meticulous and they weren't touched last year and they walked backwards into it. And it's great and it'll be remembered forever like the 08 team will. But it's the little stories like Isaiah's sister, of the thousands of games that I've now done, and I've called championships and all of it. I, to this day, vividly remember when you said think of a moment, the one that pops into my head was Leon Powe playing for the Celtics as a rookie, just trying to find his way. We get to Oakland, where he grew up. Outside the old Oracle Arena, they would have flea markets every weekend. He and his mother would go there to make ends meet. They would sell things at the flea market outside this arena, and I got to be there to call the moment when he walked onto that floor as an NBA player.
That's awesome.
And that still gives me a little good, because the championships are great and it's what's going to be remembered forever, but Isaiah coming here and starting his career over again in the most symbiotic relationship I have ever seen in the NBA. The Celtics needed him, he needed the Celtics, and it was the perfect match. Those are the stories that you tell. Those are the goosebump moments, and that's what makes fans and what they remember.
I'll throw one moment out. Two of the same night, the championship night. Joe coming out with his wife, walking around hand in hand. So I was out in the arena. I love working in the media section in the arena when everything is done and gone, and it's kind of like a big office. It's so great. So Joe was out there walking around with his wife, and that was a nice moment. And he's like, I asked him about it. He's like, I thought we were alone. No,
there's about, 100, 200, 300 people in there.
And then 4 a.m. or so, and we're still writing, we're still doing stuff, and like just about wrapping up, confetti's still on the floor, and Jalen walks in post-party. So he's celebrated a little bit. And he walks in and like the guard's down, and he's got his friends with him and the MVP trophy, and he just walks out and he's just smiling. He's like, what a beautiful sight. What a beautiful
You guys were playing ball, weren't you?
There were a couple people shooting around.
Yeah.
And he like got the ball and was like, all right, what do you think? I'm like, Jalen,
please don't dunk on me.
Please do not. I was like, not don't dunk on me. Please don't try to take a step right now. Because there's confetti all over the floor. You've been celebrating a bit. I don't want the story that I have to tell to be like, why did Jaylen Brown get hurt? Why is he on crutches on the duck boat? He did not do that, thankfully. But that moment of Jalen kind of taking it in, like it's the most real, genuine moment. So I had to share that just because it is of the current team. And it's like Jalen just soaking it in, and just what a beautiful sight. That was a great.
You said there was another one. Is there another one?
It was that one in the Joe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Joe walking around.
Yeah, that's. I mean, to your point, like
special.
the genuine moments are the ones that. I mean, all of the team gets to see behind closed doors. The guys are completely genuine there, but they just have their guard up a little bit when they're around the media, so we don't always get to see who they really are on a day-to-day basis.
Never has a guard.
No, that's a different story. That's a different story.
He's got a cappuccino. He's like winking.
Yeah, he's winking to the fans. Yeah.
And you know what? We have seen, Jason, you do see a moment every night because when he locks eyes with Deuce.
Or when Deuce runs over to him.
When Deuce runs over to him in the middle of a game or whatever it is. That's the guy. That's his entire adult life. We've all had adult lives at some level before kids. He hasn't.
I don't think Jay has.
Well,
yeah. I mean, he's in
adult
sweatpants
life
over there. Come on.
I'm still a
He
child.
does have
With a child.
Nothing wrong with that.
his nickname is the Kid.
I'm still a child with a child. I love it. Okay, there's been a lot of players who have come through the revolving door since we've all been around this team. And I think this might be a little bit of a debate. Who's everyone's favorite quote?
I mean, Marcus Smart is pretty high up there.
I'll just go quick. Robert Williams.
Oh, never would have guessed. Oh, my God.
Who had 26 minutes?
Is that a record for Chris being on camera?
It is.
Not bringing up probably.
What's easy to forget, when Rob first got here, he was very still Louisiana boy who like.
He got here a little late, by the way.
Well, he did, and that to me was endearing too, because again, there's what we're all the whole crux of this conversation has been trying to find a human element to these players, and sometimes they're just so otherworldly and talented and big, and that we like forgetting your wallet before you go to sign your NBA contract is like somewhat endearing. But Rob didn't have a filter, and so Rob would do interviews, and like every other word was a curse word, to the point where Austin Ainge had to walk over and be like,
I loved it.
Hey, can you just like maybe tone down the amount of F words in there? And we're all like, no, hey, what are you doing?
We love to bleep it.
Yeah, he was just earnest and honest, and like I loved everything about the way Rob talked, and like you know, from the setbacks to like when there were good times, he was just such a good quote in terms of like you knew you were going to get genuine history. And you could throw Isaiah in there and all that, but like definitely, I just like when people don't put that guard up, when they just speak with what they feel. And from Kristaps to Rob, all oft-injured centers are the guys.
I know Jake's answer.
Oh, there's
There has to be.
I
There's
know
one
too.
obvious one. No, wait for
the kid.
Evan
Turner's
Turner's one of them. He was
the one I was going
the
for.
funniest Celtic that I've
He is
talked
a
to.
very funny man.
I quoted Evan
So
Turner
quick-witted,
yesterday.
hilarious.
Hold on, you quoted
he was
Evan
great.
Turner
And then,
yesterday?
Yeah.
Don't
then
we
the
all?
other one is Marcus Morris.
That's the one.
That's a good one
Marcus
too.
Morris
one.
was just no BS.
Yeah.
Another guy who slid a cuss word in there every other sentence at the very least. But he would also just tell you the truth. I remember there was one night they blew like a 26-point lead against the Clippers, and we could see in the post-game locker room Marcus Morris was just stewing. And so we were like, we got to talk to Marcus.
We got it. Oh, yeah.
And I was like,
And it took a while to get to him. We were like, we're gonna wait. And there was a little time when I think PR was trying to finesse us and get us out of the locker room before he could talk. And that was when he told us that they just weren't having any fun.
and it turned out to be the most prescient. Like all of a sudden, it sort of made sense.
Yeah.
Like, oh wait, they have all this talent, but they're never harnessing it. And it was like that aha moment of, oh boy, this is worse than we think.
Who
That was a wild
who does that sound like before this current regime? I mean, you were around.
Well,
you wore number 43.
listen,
That's who Kendrick Perkins was. That guy in the locker room every night.
He was that guy. And remember, I mean, how many times did I share a live mic with Kevin Garnett? That's so I want to talk about the
dangerous.
definition of walking a tightrope. And there were some crazy things. I mean, I'd also go off the board for the 1 year for Rasheed Wallace, who was that was
The only player I've
that
ever
was as good
seen
as
drink
got.
a beer on the plane.
He was
To this day.
I used to
He
drink
was the
beers in the
absolute
locker room too.
that playoff series in Orlando, and there's 2 Bud Lights waiting after a big night. I was like, oof.
Yeah. Abby, who's your favorite quote?
That's so hard. I want to go way back. I mean, Jay Crowder was also really good about being honest whenever you asked him questions. And I mean, everyone is just always so generous with their time. I'm going to go way back. My first season, Gerald Wallace. Does anyone
Gerald Wallace.
here?
Awesome.
He had that,
Someone that I think any of us would have had on a bingo card.
Low, slow drawl. It
He
was
was
just very
the-
like.
I can remember games where he'd be like in jeans with like 45 minutes left. Everybody else is like warming up, and Gerald just waiting to go. At practices when they stretch and everything, he would just be like sleeping on the floor. and still, like, he was a great leader, a great
By the way,
veteran to
everyone else
have
He was a great vet.
in those years.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
He was
He wasn't
a
taking
great
a nap while everyone else was practicing. Yeah. Well, I guess maybe so.
He was older at that time. He had to rest up, saving his energy, a la Gordon Hayward.
Brad loved
Perhaps.
Gerald Wallace. He would not
he did.
survive that first year if not for the levity and leadership that Gerald Wallace brought and all that. But
I can't believe I'm actually embarrassed by the fact that no one else has said who I'm going to say. Maybe it's just recency bias, but Luke Cornett? I mean, come on. He's the funniest guy maybe in the NBA.
I feel like
he's
Luke's
up
toned
there.
it down this year. He's not trying to be.
I
a little
don't
buttoned up this
know.
year.
Yeah, a little buttoned up.
I
little buttoned up.
I think Luke.
Not on the court though. He's got a
No.
Luke
No.
is funny. He did the Silent Night thing before, he said Merry Christmas to everybody. But when he's actually talking to us on the podium, I don't think he has that.
That's why you got to get him in a one-on-one environment. A one-on-one environment, it's gold.
He's quick. We brought him on after after a game when I usually play a highlight coming out of the commercial with the guy that we're going to be talking to, and in the highlight he had this dominant stretch, and I'd called him Kareem Abdul-Cornet or something like that. And as soon as we come on, he goes, I always thought of myself more as Luke Alcindor.
He did it much
He
better
is
than
very
you.
funny.
Brain works
Yeah,
in a
that's it.
different
He's
way.
quick. He's
One
as
regret-
quick as anybody.
One regret I have too is that Jeff Teague was here
Oh my God.
during one of the
That's a
COVID
good-
years when we weren't
Yeah.
allowed in the locker
Yeah.
room.
And now we know who
because
Jeff
now
Teague
we
is.
know he's
Tristan
like the
Thompson,
greatest
yeah.
storyteller there is.
Yeah.
And we only got him on like a couple of Zoom calls. And we weren't able to really pick his brain at all.
That year they had stuff going on the Jumbotron where the players were asked on like media day of who the funniest guy on the team was, and everyone was like Jeff Teague, and I'm like, what? Like I didn't know that he was that guy. Now I know from watching this podcast that dude is funny. Okay,
We should get him next time.
Yeah, we'll try to get him on. We don't have a lot of time left. We've covered a lot. By the way, everyone, we're recording this before New Year's Eve, so we got a few games to play before this episode comes out. But from everyone's perspective, looking on the court, which we haven't talked a whole lot about during this pod, what should the Celtics' New Year's resolutions be as they head into 2025, trying to get out of a little bit of a rut here that they've had over the past week or two?
Play defense.
Yeah, that's it?
It's a good one.
That's it?
Play some defense. That would be nice.
But Joe just said the other day, like, he loved the way the defense played against Orlando.
Well, that's what he's telling us.
Yeah.
But like, look, he can.
We just talked about Joe being honest. You're telling me he was
I don't know,
lying?
say-
I don't think
Honest.
that's it. I don't think
I think
that's.
straightforward. It is a little bit. No, look. You can say like he'll pull out stats and he'll say. 'Cause I remember I asked him once about defensive issues, a few weeks ago, and he was like, "Oh, we're number one in expected blah blah blah." I was like, "Okay, yeah, but you still can get better." And he's like, "You can get better than number one?" Okay, I guess. And we're like, "All right, like that's he has like right." And remember that time where he was like, he was actually like keeping score in a scrum. Like, I win this conversation. But anyway, play some defense. They or consistently, and I get it, right? It's the 2024 portion, and Drew Holiday is a little older, and he's coming off a short off season and the Olympics, and haven't had KP and all of that stuff. But to get to where they are going to be ultimately, and where we all, I think, expect them to be in June, they got to get back to that defensive mentality and kind of locking down more than, a few minutes a game. They can't just rely on their shooting to get them through some games, because that's, with so many 3-point shots, not like rare.
Their expected shooting would get them through these games.
Their expected shooting, but the expected doesn't always go in, and the three is prone to slumps, just by the nature of the shot. So I'd like to see a little bit more of that defensive presence kind of show up.
I actually think something that people haven't talked about a lot this month, again, we're in December here, something that's contributed to these recent struggles, if you want to throw some air quotes around it, is the NBA Cup and the schedule, I actually think removed a little bit of their rhythm. And then in addition to that, they've had guys in and out of the line. They haven't had a consistent lineup really
that benefited
all of
them
December.
last year. The NBA Cup benefited them last year.
Yeah.
And this year.
And I think it will in the long run. Like, I think Tatum having that week off, especially like you talked about, short off season for Jrue Holiday. Jason got that whole week off. Al Horford got a whole week off. Like, I think in the long run, those are going to help. But in the short term, it kind of threw a little kink into the armor in terms of having a rhythm this year.
That is my resolution, is for health, obviously. That is the most obvious and low-hanging fruit. But yes, and I think after that loss, the first time they lost back-to-back games against Philadelphia on Christmas Day was the first time we've ever heard them talk about the fact that there are a lot of moving pieces when it comes to the lineups. And whether it's Kristaps Porzingis missing that first month of the season, or even I think Sam Hauser's injury being in and out and not having that reliable three-point shooter coming off the bench has been understated. And he's still dealing with that back issue, and it's something that I think is going to continue to affect him for the rest of the season. And now Kristaps dealing with a minor sprained ankle. And while they were so lucky with health last year. And I know Kristaps was in and out, but it is just so important, and so much of that has to deal with luck and if they can stay healthy.
By the way, last year was the first time that they actually had luck in that department. And like,
I know, and I don't want to jinx it. I feel like I need to knock on something.
I would say just don't get bored with it.
Yeah.
I think
it's easy
they've taken the right attitude toward repeating this year. They came into training camp, had a great mindset. They came into the regular season, had a great mindset. I think we've seen that dip a little bit in the last week or two.
We're going to jinx all
and I know it must be harder to stay motivated day after day when you've already won a championship, when you know that your best is good enough, when you're not fighting back against history and the last 8 years or 6 years, whatever it was for different guys, where you've gone to the conference finals, you've gone to the finals, you've always fallen short. So now they know their best is good enough. They just have to stay with it day to day and keep building those habits the way they did last year. Because last year they were by far the most consistent team in the league, at home, away, against top five, against better than 500 teams, against worse than 500 teams. It did not matter. They were the best and most consistent.
Didn't matter who was out there. Didn't matter the roadblock. It was always they found a way. And I think that's the whole thing, motivation, right? Like, it's tough. The whole, I know Joe stiff-armed our whole target on the back thing. That's not a thing, but every night it feels like the other team is coming for them. So I just want to see them be able to, and I get it. Like, you can't accomplish your ultimate goal till June. So, like, how do you find that motivation every single night in December and January and the doldrums? But you got to find it. And this team was so good at it last year and staying locked in and never letting things fester. My resolution would just be for them to kind of tap into that again.
Here's the difference. The target on the back isn't new because the Celtics have been a target for the last several years because they've been an elite team. Yep. Now, the way they have been playing and winning has become targeted, starting with that Golden State game early in the year when the Warriors were going to run them off the three-point line. You have teams that have changed the way their roster composition. Teams like Atlanta and Orlando are going to have all these long, athletic guys. The Celtics now that they have won, they're not just a target. They're also the standard. You have to beat the way they play to beat them, and you have the rest of the league is now geared up. So it's not just getting up to play a big game every night. Now a lot of teams have geared up specifically to stop the way the Celtics win, and that's been pretty apparent.
This is why Joe said, I think, on my podcast, I hope we see the red dot on our foreheads.
Yeah.
What a flex.
Give him credit when you're talking about it. Come on, guys.
Yeah, seriously.
Only one podcast had Joe this summer.
So I think the reason why he said that is to Jay's point. When you see that you're being targeted, that's going to make you kind of like, okay, we have to rise to the challenge of being targeted. And complacency, that was an off-season storyline, and it does continue to be a storyline, especially when you see, like against Philly, like the defense wasn't there, and then in the last 3.5 minutes of the game, all of a sudden it was. You know, Tyrese Maxey all of a sudden can't get the ball over half court for 2-3 possessions. You're like, that's the defense right there. The complacency is, guys love to say human nature a lot. It's one of Jason Tatum's favorite phrases. I think the human nature element is definitely part of it, and why Joe wants them to feel that being targeted so they can play a more intense kind of brand of basketball and not be like, oh, we're going to be fine. He wants them to not feel fine. Yeah. And it makes me wonder what kind of tricks Joe is. What's Joe going to do in January?
That's what I was just going to ask. Your comment, Chris, is like, how does he keep them amped up into you.
He gets paid a lot of money. He can figure that out. But
it's going to be like Gladiator. He's just going to have tigers hidden underneath the floor and just let them out.
We know the way he does it, right? Like he breaks up the year into little chunks. And so when you guys are watching this, it'll be a new chunk of the year for Joe. And he'll have something they're kind of striving towards to fuel them. And they've got to all kind of buy into that. But he will find something that, gets them back on that focus.
Love it. Well, hey, we're hitting like 40
Hold on. This
here.
is the most important part.
Hold on.
People.
No.
Everybody vote at home. Which one? Oh, no.
Well, hold on. No.
No, I was just saying, first off,
text Karalis.
All you psychotic Celtics fans who press play on all these different podcasts, you're the real heroes out there.
Facts.
And if you made it this far in this podcast, holy cow.
And if you made it this far in this podcast, the most important thing to take away is that of all of the podcasts represented up here, only one of them has not gotten Joe Mazzulla. You got some work to do.
I guess I did.
He brought you on the
Hey, just draw an ice bath, buddy. He'll be there.
We knew this was going to be the jump on Jay's head.
Shout out to all the other Celtics podcasts.
Did Jay
Get
get
excited.
Yeah, we could only fit 6, as you can see. We're filling the space up.
Shout out to B. Robin Packard.
Yeah. So
Sherrod, Max, everybody.
Let's go down the line. Where can everyone find the pods and make sure that they're able to tune in and find what you guys got?
Still Poddable. Go to patreon.com/stillpoddable. Sign up. Become a kid or god or a legend.
Forsberg.
If you don't know, I can't help you.
Locked On Celtics. It's free. It's free 5 days a week.
And it stinks. And you got to listen to
podcast after they play.
Used to podcast together.
We started the podcast together, and then I jettisoned the dead weight.
I kind of miss him sometimes.
Take it off.
I left him, to be fair.
To be clear.
Well, there is no dead weight here with View from the Rafters. We are at youtube.com/Boston Celtics. You can find us on all the podcast platforms. Thank you guys for coming on. This has been an awesome crossover. I think the biggest mega podcast crossover that will ever happen in the Celtics.
The event of the season,
It is.
some might say.
It is. All might say. So thank you all for watching. We appreciate you for listening and watching all of our podcasts across the board, and hope you're all having a great start to the new year.